What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 27 of the Drunken Boxing Podcast, coming to you as usual from the capital of the Middle Kingdom, Beijing, China. Let's get into some general news. As many of you are aware, over on the Mushin Martial Culture YouTube channel, I was releasing a series titled Shaolin Legacy, which was covering the temple's history, much of which is unknown and clouded by myths and legends, which in fact do a disservice to the actual history of the temple. I have taken a short break from that series to release a series on the hidden history of Schweijau. This series should run for between 2 and 3 episodes maximum, and will present the often deliberately hidden history of modern Schweijau, or Chinese wrestling. Episode 1 is out already, and is getting some very good feedback, so do check it out. My plan is to release the remaining episodes of this series in relatively short order. However, the preparation, filming, and editing of these episodes is an immense amount of work, and at times can take longer than desired. Rest assured though, I am pushing to release it rather quickly. Also, I have released another episode of the Martial Parks of Beijing in the Senki series, this time focusing on Zizhu Yuan, or Purple Bamboo Park. This is a special place for me, as I used to train with my Shifu, Di Guoyong, there every day, and sometimes in the dark of the night, well over a decade ago, before we started only training in the courtyard of his residential compound. So going back there brought back many great memories. Some of those wonderful sessions that I had with my teacher from back then came rushing back into my memory and my thoughts when I was back there. Apart from that, it is a beautiful park with a unique character, much like the people that do various practices there. Additionally, I have released yet another Baguazhang 10-minute primer, which is focusing on another core practice within the Liang-style Baguazhang system. These are all out now, so head on over and check them out on the Mushin Martial Culture YouTube channel. As always, I am extremely grateful to all of you that support the Drunken Boxing Podcast and all the Mushin Martial Culture endeavors through my Patreon site. Your support through Patreon helps me to continue producing the content that I do. If any of you enjoy my endeavors and would like to pledge some support for the podcast or the channel, you may do so through the Patreon site. The Patreon site may be found at patreon.com/Mushin Martial Culture. That's all one word. And I'll put that in the show notes for you to find. And for those of you that are looking to study the arts of Xingyi and Baguazhang, on the Mushin Martial Culture Patreon site, apart from the general support tiers, you will find a third tier, the Huajin tier, which is the online learning tier. Here, you will have the ability to study the arts of Xingyi and Baguazhang from me through a comprehensive program which features in-depth lesson videos and learning support. I'm confident that the quality of the content and the depth of instruction will help you to successfully study and practice these wonderful arts, which I'm immensely passionate about. Also, you can find all our merchandise on our Teespring store, which includes various t-shirts and other items. I regularly release new designs as they are completed, so check it out. You can view the Mushin Martial Culture Teespring store directly on Teespring. The link is in the show notes, or you may simply search for Mushin Martial Culture within the Teespring site itself, which is teespring.com. That's teespring.com. Alright, let's get into today's episode. This month's guest is a dear old friend of mine named Paul Hanrahan, who originally hails from Johannesburg, South Africa. He has been living and training in Taiwan permanently since 2009 in the Chang Hong System, founded by the late Chen Qinghe. I met Paul in South Africa, as we were both Chinese martial arts enthusiasts many, many years ago. At that time, he was studying at the Chinese Martial Arts and Health Center under Marco Cavalier, himself a student of Chen Qinghe in Taiwan. Paul was someone I instantly clicked with when I first met him. He was someone who was deeply passionate about the Chinese martial arts and a person with a deep mind on the subject. I knew from when I first met him that his destiny would eventually lead him to go deeper into the art, and indeed, that is what he did when he decided to move his life over to Taiwan and study with his teacher there, similar to what I did by coming to Beijing. Paul has always been an exceptional martial artist. In this discussion, we cover a broad range of topics regarding his history, training with Master Chen, and of the system he created, which combines what is classified as long fist along with the southern style of Hungar, or Hong Jia Quan. Anyway, let's get right into it. Here is Paul Hanrahan. Okay, welcome to the Drunken Boxing Podcast, Paul. We're old friends. We've known each other for a very long time. Welcome.
Hey, Byron, how you doing?
I'm doing good. So, okay, just for the listeners out there, I've known you since way back when we were both still living in South Africa. You were a talented and, in my mind, one of the more gifted martial artists in South Africa when I was there. And since then, which is I don't know how many years ago we first met. It's I don't know, must
Well,
be
it's way before that, but the first time we actually went, in an official capacity overseas was 2004 together. I mean, sure, you went before, but
yeah, yeah,
2004, 2006.
right. And now you live in Taipei in Taiwan, where you've been
Yeah,
for
yeah, yeah.
how long now?
I moved here in 2009, and it
Okay.
was just a try it out. I'd already been to study with the Changhong System in Taipei
Mm.
several years before, but then I found out I can actually, I work in the film industry, and there's companies here that would hire me if my Chinese was vaguely good enough, and then basically spent about 4 years slowly learning a bit of Chinese in South Africa.
Mm.
And so then, when I had an interview with them, I could at least do the ni hao, et cetera, et cetera. And they kind of gave me a chance, and then just never looked back.
Yeah.
Been here about 11 years now.
Well, that's awesome, and I mean, I always knew that South Africa couldn't contain well, your desires with regards to martial arts. I mean, I always had that inkling in the back of my mind that at some point you'd find your way closer to the root of what you were learning. But you started this system that you're currently within. You started training that in South Africa. Maybe we could get
Yeah,
into
yeah.
your like a bit of your background. I mean, from wherever your martial journey started.
Yeah, I mean, I did when I was very young, I did the usual, like, a couple of weeks of judo, a couple of lessons of karate. I mean, I think everyone did that. That's basically all that was available to us
Mm.
in the early in the 80s. Then there was a little bit of Chinese martial arts that came in, and basically I studied with a teacher, Marco Cavalier, and I've basically been with him. We still totally connected as part of the same system. I'm
Mm.
just now in Taiwan, but it's all the same lineage of martial arts. And I started with him, I think it was my last year of school, so 1989, basically.
Right.
And just, yeah, I've just, in a sense, I've been quite boring. I've just stuck with the same system. Um, but there's so much to learn, and, it's always kept my interest. So yeah, I just stayed on with that.
I don't know if boring is the right word. Maybe in today's world
Yeah,
that
yeah.
would be
Well,
considered boring, but that's called practical and down to earth and realistic. I would say so. Yeah.
also you encounter something that I mean, okay, maybe you play tennis, you do other things, and you realize, okay, I can do this. I've got
Mm.
coordination, I can do this. But then with the martial arts, it's nah, especially if you want to do it your way. You
Mm.
come in with an ego and you want to do it just, sorry, it's not working. Keep trying. It's nice to have something like that in your life that you're not necessarily going to succeed at your way. You're gonna have to change to get it right.
Right, right. So you studied, and what is the system? I've met obviously Marco. I know him as well for many years. I'm familiar with the background of your system. I've also met some of your fellow martial brothers, etc., within your system in Taiwan, in Taipei. The last couple of times I was there. But
Yeah, yeah.
for
Last
the
time we met up,
listeners,
yeah.
yeah, for the listeners, let's.
Um, yeah. So it's a in a sense it's already not. I mean, it's got traditional roots, but it's already a combination. So in
Mm.
simple sense, it's basically some northern Shaolin styles, cumulatively what came out of the Nanjing Institute curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
So the lineage there is Han Jingtan and Li Maoqing, and that is, it's got a bit of Ta Chuan, a bit of Pao Chuan. It's really just by Northern Shaolin first, who came from that.
Right.
And then also my direct teacher, who is Chen Qinghe, Chen Qinghe Lao Si, he is, he's passed away a while back, but he was literally just he was studied a huge range of styles, but the two which he chose to become his system was one, the northern style which came out of the Nanjing Institute, and secondly Hongquan.
Okay.
And that Hongquan, which came from he was taught by someone, a no-name teacher, but had a big influence on him when he was young. But then he also studied with Zhang He, as in that's the Taiwan Hong Quan lineage.
So when we say Hong Quan, because you're using the Mandarin terminology, and there is a style from Shanxi and the areas in China called Hong Quan, but you're referring to Honggar, which is the southern style.
Right. Oh, yeah. So, okay. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. To use that, the more commonly used technique.
Yeah. All right. So that was quite interesting. I've heard a lot of very interesting stories about Zhang Laoshi, both in skill and in antics. But we can get into that later. But how do you find the combination of these two seemingly so different styles? I mean, the one being northern. I know that Han Qinghe, I mean, if we look at a lot of what he learned and what he studied, it can be considered exactly as you've said. There's some Cha Chuan in there, there's some Hua Chuan in there, which is a combination of what was put into the Nanjing Guoshu Institute curriculum. There's some Pao Chuan in there. Then there's also some Mei Hua Zhuang, which is, a lot of people don't realize that Mei Hua Zhuang and Mei Hua Chuan, similar interchangeable names, is so pervasive in the north in terms of setting a foundation for people that practice northern martial arts. It was something that just was commonly taught as a basis before they went into these other styles like you did. So, it's quite interesting that these two styles were put together in your curriculum of the northern stuff.
It's very much that approach. I mean, I'll give you an example. Like if someone came to our system and said, because we also through the Li Mao Qing they also had a Taiji Chuan, the Yang style long form. And so basically, if someone would say, maybe they were older or they only had an interest in Taiji, and they'd say, I want to learn Taiji, they would say to them, cool, but you learn the Chang Chuan basics first. Okay. Because it's it's got the 6 basic stances.
Exactly.
You do basic kicks. It's just the entry for everything. I mean, this is also what I realized coming to, in the West, I felt like, martial arts was something that I could do, although I wasn't particularly a good fighter. My forms were okay, but the people I was surrounded by, there were people who were skilled at certain things, but you felt like you're all much of a muchness. But then, I came and met the Master Chen in Taiwan, and you realize this guy's forgotten more things than you're ever going to learn in your life. It just the level of skill and the level of dedication is just on it's a totally another level. And so, if you're walking in the door saying, I don't want to learn long fist, just teach me the dragon form, or just something, you've got this dream in your head, this kind of, what do you call it, like a fantasy, this illusion in your head that you're chasing after. So, first you're missing the point by a million miles. Basics are everything, etc., etc. And you slowly learn this. And in a way, I think I went through, because the form has our system has 60 forms or whatever. I feel like I went through that the first time in the wrong mindset. Okay. And now that I've pretty much learned most of the forms, I'm kind of starting again. I'm almost 50, and now I'm really just focused on a couple of forms, focusing on basics, and just, making sure the feeling is correct. And so, I mean, that's because, I mean, if you sit and question me about history and lineage and that kind of thing, you'll find that after like 2 or 3 sentences, you realize, I actually don't know too much about the history and all that kind of thing. So, in comparison to other systems that really, where that's very important, the way Master Chen taught it, and what I'm saying is I'm just totally a product of the way I was taught, obviously. Yeah. He saw that in people, this kind of dream, this kind of fantasy about lineage, and just, almost like, Kung Fu movie kind of fantasy bullshit. Yeah. And he would actively break that down in people, say, that's not helping you, don't focus on that, focus on your basics. It's modern day. You've got to have something that's, typical thing is people would want to do iron body conditioning. But obviously they didn't want to put in the time. They didn't want to put in the efforts. They would do it inconsistently, which is all risky. It's not. So I mean, he would say, nowadays you probably don't need it. You probably don't need that type, and that he did it, as part of his training. But he really had a how do you say? It's like he learned, say, 300 forms or 500 forms or whatever. He decided, I'm going to make a system out of 60 of those, mostly Tangquan and Hongquan.
Yeah.
And it's a modern interpretation for the modern person. It's not people who are, physically strong. They work in the fields. You're talking about modern people who sit at a computer most of the time. And so, it's really about lifestyle wushu.
Right.
That's what I'm really getting to. It's not your
trying to maintain the mentality, the outlook, and the functionality of preceding generations to that degree, because the society has changed and so has the lifestyle changed. That's what you're trying to say, right? Yeah,
and suitable for what you need.
Right.
I think that's the thing. But doesn't matter what generation you're in and what, are you a policeman? Do you actually you have to defend yourself often, or are you just a businessman who just wants to keep fit? Or depending on what you are, the basic principles still apply.
Of course.
And are you getting the right feeling of force inside your body? And that's even our system even covers a fair amount of qigong. But, it's totally practical. It's all about how your breath is used to manipulate force in your body. Nothing else.
Right.
There's no, like...
mysticism and magic.
Nothing, just nothing. It's just, it's seen as... They basically... Westerners see the body as two domains, mental and body. That split. The Chinese root is basically three domains, which is body, mind, and then one in the middle called qi, which is, depending on how you interpret it, but it is a domain and it needs to be taken care of, and it's important when generating force.
Right.
He just had a very practical approach to things, and that's kind of, obviously I'm a product of that.
Right. Did you, when you started your training in Taiwan comparatively to what you had already, you were quite well advanced already by the time you decided to make the jump and go train in Taiwan with Master Chen. What did you find was the biggest differences? In general, I'm not saying technical specifically, but just overall, any differences, what lifestyle, mentality, outlook, etc.
Something that's really hit home to me is I've heard people say that environment is very important. So, because obviously it's any sport or any habit, any practice that you have, but if the principal is telling you to do it one way, but everyone around you is doing it another way, it's very hard to keep that, to deviate from the flow. You naturally, if you live in Taiwan for a while, you start driving fast. You start driving like a maniac. You know what I mean? The culture soaks into you. So the obviously because of language issues as well. Direct comparison: South Africa versus Taiwan. South Africa's got this rough edge to it. It's all about, you need martial arts to actually defend yourself sometimes. Where in Taiwan, not really, not so much. Obviously you meet lots of people who want to, test their martial arts on you, sure, but not in life-threatening situations. And obviously you could say that South Africa is it's more, call it realistic, call it life-threatening, that kind of edge to it. And it's a Western culture, it's more harder, it's more about, smacking someone down, physical force. It's all about, collision, and the best collision you can make, the most powerful collision you make. Whereas in the principle, if you're just going to go with the martial theory, it's about no collision, and it's about, flowing with the opponent's force, etc., etc. Which is not unique to our system. even, I don't know, I guess obviously the wrestling styles and Aikido and those kinds of very much about flowing with force and not encountering it.
Pliancy.
So yeah, I mean, yeah. So back to your question, it's all about environment was different, and also more depth in terms of slowly starting to learn Chinese, understand more principles, and get things, because it's like like when you learn Chinese, you don't just learn the language, you have to learn a bit of Chinese culture to understand the language.
Right.
Because there's so many phrases in Chinese that are historical quotes that have now become common dialects, part of the dialect. So you have to learn a bit of history to understand Chinese.
Right.
And the same thing is when you learn martial arts, you have to learn some of the culture. You need to know that, okay, this came from a whatever Taoist root of history of something, where things came from. And you slowly get imbued with the culture.
You said something you said something quite interesting. You said, you described the South African mentality quite well, that things have to clash in terms of force on force, and things are very much, what's the word? So the contrast between natural state and conflict state is so clear. I mean, and it's so present, and it's. Would you say that mentality also creeps into the way people train? That even training is such a huge contrast to just being part of your life. I mean, the general mentality in South Africa that it.
Well, that totally segues into my second point, which was, it's not. It's in South Africa. It's slightly more like it's. Training is just something that you go and do several times a week. Whereas here, it's literally you wake up and you do it.
Right.
And the culture of it's very present in any Asian culture. It's basically like you're the guy who makes noodles, and you do that every day. And there's no, even Sundays, you just make the noodles and sell them. You make the noodles and sell them. So having a basic craft, having a basic skill that you have become so good at, you don't even
think about it.
It's just totally instinctive, and that's where the whole lifestyle thing comes from. Whereas in the West, it's more about this is something that I'm interested in, and I'm adding it onto my life. But it's not necessarily, because again, it's about environment. If you just blurt out in a Western social situation that you study martial arts, people don't have a lot of they're gonna start making Bruce Lee noises and doing what what I mean. That people have this weird where here it's just like, okay, cool, no problem.
You and half the apartment building next door are practicing martial arts.
But and the thing is you see it more in the because my feeling now is the place you want to be. You don't want to be the muscle ripped guy learning killer martial arts. You want to be more like the old grandpa or grandma in the park doing those ping shui gong, that kind of exercise where it's just those okay, you just do it 1,000 times and then you just go home. You know what I mean? It's just a simple exercise. It's about simple rotation. And it's obviously, I mean, my focus has changed. This is not the 30-year-old or 20-year-old me you're speaking to. I'm almost 50 now, and I've got different requirements for my training.
Right.
It's a lot more about body maintenance. But yeah, I mean, the process that I went through, it's very much like, I had, one attitude when I was in Taiwan. I moved in South Africa, then I moved to Taiwan, and I kind of was hanging in there. I had this kind of, you call it macho bravado, I'm going to keep learning the system. And then, even the strange thing is, it was actually many years after my teacher passed away that I feel that I actually started understanding.
Okay.
Now, how weird is that?
Well, I think that's important. I mean, this is something that I've also been contemplating a lot. Don't you find that after... Okay, I'm not going to even make a general statement like that. I just started it like a general statement. Okay, I found that I'd been training with my teacher for a long time, very closely on a daily basis. And, after X amount of years, you think you understand, but then later on your own, in your own time, you start to develop a different understanding. I mean, a true understanding. I don't know how to explain it. I'll give you an example. Just before the pandemic broke out, my teacher went to Australia, so he was visiting his daughter who lives there, and then we've had the outbreak, and everything's closed, so he's not able to come back, and he's stuck there. And even though I'm in contact with him, and I talk to him every few days, we'll sometimes have a video call, etc., and I'll just catch up and see how he's doing. For the most part, I haven't had that regular contact training with him. I mean, you've come and met him, and you've seen us train there before.
Yeah. I've drunk the Baijiao. I've had the rocket fuel.
Chinese Vit
for a non-drinker, it was quite a thing.
But without all of that, you start to have a different. I mean, I wasn't going after X amount of years. I was with him maybe 3 or 4 times a week, whereas in the beginning I was with him like every single day. But that's gone, and I'm still training every single day on my own. But that introspection is important. Alone, after a certain amount of time, that introspection is really important, I think, in terms of, from my experience, to get an understanding. I don't know how better to explain that. But
the way I'd interpret that is it's about, part of the process of teaching is about feeding the jing, wei jing, right?
Right.
And what that is it's not a verbal communication. It's something that the way the teacher would teach a student is that they would feel, they push them back, push them over, punch, and it's feeling how the force feels like when it goes into your body. And that's a physical memory. It's not something that you can interpret on the day, and it's not something you can interpret within 5 years, but within 10, 15 years, because you've had that feeling done on you, you can slowly start to interpret it. And I think without that component, so for example, if you were only learning via video, you'd never have that thing. So
sure.
It's a physical art. You have to physically experience it, and you have to basically ingest it. It has to become part of you, and then you can do it. So yeah, I think they're little treasures that the teacher's planting in you. And then if you stick to the rules, if you follow the guidelines, and you put in the hours, then those treasures will pop open at the right time.
I remember,
without being too mysterious or anything. Just you need to put in the time, but that physical contact thing is very important.
I remember, like, way back when. I mean, maybe it was the 2nd or 3rd year that I was here and training quite often with my teacher. My teacher used to tell me, like, you need to also train on your own. And I was like, yeah, I do. He said, yes, it's good that you do, because training on your own is also really important for your own understanding.
Yeah.
And I didn't really
more important. Yeah.
I didn't understand why he said that. I thought maybe he wanted me to not come the next day or something, but I was like, yeah, okay, I do train on my own anyway, because I mean, at times I'd be with him in the morning, and then in the afternoon I'd be doing my own thing, etc. But for me, I don't want to, it sounds kind of boastful, but no one ever had to push me to train. I'm glad that I've always had that drive in myself. So it wasn't as if, teacher's here, let's train. Teacher's not here, let's sit on our butt and waste time. It was, training is just something that I've always been able to push myself to do. And even more so after so many years with my teacher, realizing in the beginning that I knew nothing and I didn't understand anything, and how that, exactly what you said, those feelings within your own body when you're just paying attention to the mechanics, the feelings, the structure, the force, etc. You kind of get addicted to it. You're kind of like, okay, you're doing research, physical research on yourself. It's like your body is a lab, and every day you're like, okay, I've kind of figured this out, but tomorrow I need to, and you can't wait the next day to carry on. So I think it's really important, and that's one thing that I think that is lacking in the West, which is really a problem, is that training is so separate from life. It's like exactly as you said, it's almost like a role that you play. I'm going to training on these 2 nights, and you're a different person there, and you're doing different things, and it's totally disconnected from your life. And then you go home and you're back to, your usual life without any thought of your training. But it should be something that's almost in the back of your mind, or even subconsciously going on all the time. And I found that becomes stronger here. when I was, here. It's probably some.
Yeah, more the lifestyle thing, but it's like you own your own worst enemy. I mean, just to in comparison to you, I'll just tell you the summary of my situation is I'm the type of person who has a lot of interests. So maybe art or this or martial arts, several things. And I go into these little patches, into each little area intensively for a while and then drift away and then go to another. So I flit between interests. And what I feel like is I always used to feel I don't have enough time to train my system completely, the martial arts system completely, because there's forms, there's there's 2 different styles, actually 3 if you're going to take Tai Chi as separate. Then each has weapons and bare hand forms, huge amount of forms. Even in the Hong Chen, if you're going to really understand the snake or the crane or the tiger, that's it could be a lifetime. So how the hell am I going to find the time to do this? But the thing is, if you're doing what you mentioned, that Western approach of pockets of time, pockets of training spent on it, and then you leave it, you go back to some other habit, that's why you never have time. But if the way you move, the way you walk, the way you sit at work is in accordance with the principles that you've learned, then you're training all the time.
Right.
And it's all your training time. And if you're sitting badly or picking something up off the floor and it's strain on your body, then you're not training. You're doing your old habit. And the more that you can do everything in your life in this required habit by the training, then there you go. You maxing out your training time.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I even found as you said, the curriculum. I mean, I focus on the 2 styles that my teacher taught me, predominantly Xingyi Quan. That was the major system, and Bagua as well. But I focus predominantly on Xingyi Quan and all the different. You've seen some of the Gong Fa and the Neigong practices that are staple.
Yeah.
I mean, they are staple. There's no way that you'll go to training and not do that first. That is more important than everything else, and that alone takes a long time. But
what do you mean, not leg day and arm day? What?
Leg day is every day.
One day arms. Yeah, exactly.
So I remember
Yao Ma.
Exactly. He showed me a specific way to practice what we call deng cai. Deng is pedaling power and cai is stamping power, and in a in a static fashion, which is really a core method of Xingyi Quan. And I would go to and from training on the subway and the buses doing that, and eventually it came. Admittedly, if I'm standing on the subway doing this, I mean, I'm not like, I don't have my hands up in a guard position. I'm focusing on my legs and my lower body. But if to an observer who's looking at me, he'll see that I'm doing something that's not quite normal,
Yeah.
And understandably, I guess if you had to do this in New York, you'd probably get some weird responses, and over here it's more easily accepted. But I did find ways to, and that's been my big policy in my life for years now. It's like, don't waste time. So I try to find time that I can do something everywhere, and then it starts to become something that permeates your whole life. It's total integration, and that's how I feel it should be. So
yeah. I mean, I've also another. It's kind of links to back what you said earlier. Is your teacher's away, and so now you train on your own, and you reap the benefits. The process that we've been through here in Taiwan is up till 2013, when my teacher died. We were basically in the presence. We were totally humbled by his presence, someone of massive skill who could basically take out all of us. He just outskilled us, quite simply. You take away being respectful, being polite. When I got more familiar with him, I really tried to get through it. He's really someone who's on another level. So, but also he's keeping everyone in line, and no one has to think. They just ask. If they're in a doubt, they just ask him. They forget a move, they ask him.
Right.
Then, poof, one day he dies.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And then there you go. Now is the time where it gets serious. It's because what are you going to do? You're going to go and learn something else now that he's gone. Is that all that prep, all that nurturing what are you going to do with it?
Right.
Now's the time for you to go home and practice everything that he told you. And so slowly, obviously there's sorrow, there's things that you have to go through there, but what comes, you need, once you've gone through it, like 5 years later, you start actually doing it. But also, in a way, these masters are actually so, the level that they're on is, if they speak directly to you, you don't understand it. You actually needed to go through someone who's been roughly half the time. So you know what I mean? You need your Sishong to explain to you, to interpret to you. I found that very much so, where I actually learned from, as long as it's someone who themselves is on the right track, I could actually get more concrete information from them. As like, okay, I'm heading for this higher target, but I have no clue how to get there. But this person who's halfway there can help me up the ladder. I mean, that's very much because you need to have the ladder. You need to know what your next small step is to get to the top of this thing, which you have no way of how to surmount on your own.
I think you've kind of nailed something there, but I mean that's the purpose of each subsequent generation. That's the conclusion I've come to, because my teacher would tell me that his teacher never explained things to him in the way that he explains it to me. In other words, he would say to me that he put a lot of thought into understanding what his teacher told him in a very cognitive and clear way, so then he could then more easily teach that to his students so that they would understand in a shorter amount of time the same thing that took him 2 years, he wants us to understand in a year, And I think that's exactly why you're saying, like, us as his students, or your teacher's students, our job is to then take even his clarity, depth, and refinement and take it and clarify it, refine it even more. Now, that doesn't mean that people should now immediately, before they understand it, start changing it, because then that happens too often.
Yeah, that's PN. That's PN. That's you missing your PN. Sorry, my English has got worse and worse over the years as I speak more and more Chinese. But basically, it's you
off the track.
Missing the center. You off the track. There
yeah.
It's. I totally agree. It's.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Because, I mean, another thing I wanted to mention is not really on this topic, but it's got the same flavors to what we're talking about here, is that you mentioned, I've seen some of your videos, and I've been, you've been putting out the Xingyi basics.
Yeah.
I find so much common in the, the Hong Chen has a Sanjiao Ma, it's basically like 70% weight on the back foot, 30% weight on the front foot. And it's not a high stance, it's not a low stance, it's a nice in-between stance, and it's the basis for all our sparring.
Okay. It's like a combat stance.
Very, very, very similar to your Santi Shi. And, I feel, like when you talk about various aspects of it, I don't feel like the two are that far apart. So, and for me, that's encouraging to feel like that there's a commonality between, across styles, that it's a wider principles that apply. Because I think people spend too much time in saying which is the best style, which is the, they try and code it from that way, but it's actually all about the person.
And the principles. And it's all about, I think the underlying principles you've just touched on are universal, because human bodies are universal, and effective use of a human body in terms of mechanics, motion, etc., for the large part will overlap. Nuances aside, tactics aside, other small details aside, and I say small, but sometimes they are quite they deviate from one another quite a bit. Those aside, I think at the basis, and this is why there's so much commonality between Xingyi and Baguazhang, for example, and it's precisely because of these overlapping ideas with good body mechanics. And I have seen the same thing with good Southern arts that echo the same thing. When I say good, I don't mean the art isn't good. I mean practiced well, because in my opinion, all arts are good.
Yeah.
So it's the person, and the same in the North. So exactly what you've just said is completely valid, and I think that's where people get lost in the not being able to see the forest from the trees. Is that they start focusing on the external ideas more than the inherent principles that drive them. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's you can end up with something, a style that sure looks like Hong Chen or sure looks like Xingyi Chen, but if you were to interrogate the feeling inside the person, the force would be in all the wrong places. And the most simple example is you take how core training has come into the West, right? Like when we were young, there was no such thing. You just bicep curls in the gym or did that. You want strong legs? Okay, then do bench squats. There you go. But now slowly this like core training. Okay, the stomach muscles, very important. They stabilize the whole body, that kind of things. And you could keep going down that track for 100 years of iteration, but you still end up with something different to the Chinese martial arts approach, which is the force must stick to the center and all the parts must glue into the center, and then force projects only on that center. So every part, like the typical picture of the bulging pectoral muscles of someone who's been at the gym too much, bulging biceps, that shows that the force is moving away from the skeleton in some sense.
I see what you
mean.
mean.
Hence the typical Chinese martial arts body is not ripped. It's kind of a bit chubby and round, if you know what I mean, because there's no requirement for force to move away from the central structure. Well, and these things, the way you train, so like you are what you eat kind of look, the way you train is how your body will look.
Right. Yes, exactly. You're forging a body type, a body shape, and a motion type that starts to permeate everything.
With every step you take, with every instinct, every instinctive, your force usage instincts just manifest themselves in your body. It's like your shoes wear on the outer edge or the inner edge. Depends where your force is being placed.
Right. Or if you have a shitty pair of shoes. But that's another topic.
Right.
I just actually finished reading a book that's really interesting. It's by a guy called Richard Amos. Now, Richard Amos is a karateka. It's got nothing to do with Chinese martial arts, but he was an early karateka who went to Japan in the early days of the JKA. So when it was still the old JKA, and he was the first European to complete the instructor 4-year instructor, or is it 3 years? I can't recall if it's 3 or 4 years, but the instructor program to become a certified instructor, training in Japan for all those years. But the book is fascinating, so I highly recommend it for anybody who wants to read about his experiences. It's a memoir. It's called Chasing Bushido. But he says something in there which is really interesting. So when he was going through and it comes back to your discussion about that our Santi Shi posture in Xingyi Quan, which you say is very similar to your Hong Quan's combat posture. He was saying that there's this posture in one of their kata, in one of their JKA forms. And he had in his instructor program, he had a few senpai, a few instructors that had gone before him, that were teaching them every day, that they were learning under. And on X day it would be this guy, and on X day it would be that guy, and each of them had their own nuances and quirks, and each of them had their different levels of experience. Like the one teacher, if I recall, the guy he's talking about, there was one teacher, he said, who was totally besotted with body mechanics and just feeling how things move from one joint to the other. And if I recall, that teacher actually is married to somebody from China whose father was a Chinese martial artist, and that's how he got into all of that, because the father-in-law was teaching him White Crane, if I recall, something to that effect. Right. But anyway, it makes sense as to why he started going very deep into the mechanics and the transferring of every little degree and how it comes out and how the body moves and things like that. But he would say there was this posture where they did I forgot the name because, sorry, I'm not familiar with karate terms, but it's a oblique type of posture that looks similar to Santi Shi. And he was saying that he started having questions in his head between differing teachers, because he was saying that the one teacher, they would teach it with the arm completely out, like almost side on, fully side on, like the body turned and completely side on. And he's saying, it doesn't even make sense with regards to the name of the technique that this guy would teach it like this. And he would ask them why, and half of them couldn't explain. But then the next day, another teacher would show it with a more oblique angle, etc. And he was saying, but he found that it makes more sense at an oblique angle, with the hand angled in slightly, the fingertips pointing at an oblique angle up towards the face, the majority of the weight on the rear foot turned out to between 90 degrees and 45 degrees. And I was like, he's just discovered Santi, sure.
Yeah.
And it was really funny to me to observe somebody figuring this out through feeling. And he said, he didn't understand why these guys were not just looking at older photos of older generations of people doing Shotokan, where you can see how clearly it differs, the posture, from some of these other people that were doing it completely side on. And from a practical point of view, it doesn't make sense. So, I think at the end of the day, you said that you saw similarity in Hong Quan, and I've just seen similarity that this guy found in karate. So that exists. I mean, these aspects are universal. We just need to understand why we're doing them, and that's half of it is through learning, and half of it is through feeling. So it's quite interesting.
And then the paradox is that, sure, the underlying principles might be the same, but that doesn't mean that you must take all the styles that you learn and make them look like each other.
Yeah.
Each style, Tai Chi needs to be rounded in all the joints. Tang Chen needs to have, whatever, the opening and closing, this cycling. Lian Mian Bu Duan, the unbroken force. And then Hong Chen has its own characteristics. So that's the tough part, is to how do I manifest these principles, which are common, but then keep within the style, because that's the debate, is do you want to is it important to preserve tradition, or doesn't it matter? We just need to rip out the functionality and throw everything away. Who knows?
Yeah,
that's a personal choice.
Well, for me, it depends on what that boils down to, what definitions, what you're defining as tradition. I mean, for me, the principles are the tradition. So like I said earlier, if somebody is understanding something after a long period of time, digesting the learning, and then refining that, he's still in line with the tradition. Because for the most part, if he's learned correctly, he's not going to break those underlying principles, but he could add and build on it, and that's fine. So there is a difference between that, and I think people too superficially look at it on both sides. On the one side, the people without tradition, without lineage, etc., don't seem to understand it. So all they think about is that it's some rigid conformity to non-change, which is not the case, actually. That's not the case. And on the other side, people that are too within these things sometimes think they imitate, and they cannot change anything without truly understanding and developing something. So both sides are a problem. You need kind of both perspectives, and then experience and time. So
the bad side of your second example there, of someone who's all about tradition but doesn't understand what it is. I mean, the analogy my teacher gave was, it's basically like generation after generation passing on a box. That's the special box of our system, and we're going to pass it on to the teacher passes it on to you, pass it on for many generations. But firstly, you've no clue what's in the box. It could actually be empty, and you've no way of, even if there was something useful inside there, you wouldn't understand it, because you're just passing on the external. You haven't ingested, it hasn't become part of you, and you're not. The principles aren't inside you.
Yeah, very good analogy of a box. I think that sums it up very well.
So something that I wanted to mention, maybe it's a way that martial arts is different from other sporting or whatever lifestyle activities is. I mean, you mentioned that your previous generation teachers would actually not explain things, and they were hard to learn from because they just wouldn't tell you stuff, and that's the stereotypical view of the traditional Kung Fu teacher. It's like, maybe in 10 years you'll understand, kind of thing. You have to remember that martial arts is an essential part of it. It's a little bit like trial by fire.
Yep.
And you can't spoon feed the student. You have to lock them up and see if they can escape. You have to, you don't train a warrior by with what's it called, kid gloves or whatever. You actually have to push someone and test what comes back, and actually put them in semi-dangerous situations so that when they actually get the dangerous situation, they can deal with it. So also that's the process. It's a, it's really like it's a honing process.
Yeah.
It can't be too comfortable, if you know what I mean.
Well,
but it's got to be. It can't just be gung ho boot camp style as well.
No.
That's also that's not raising the right force usage habits as well.
Well, I don't know if you've ever read any Stoic writings about Stoicism and the people that.
No, I haven't.
So, I mean, Stoicism is a form of philosophy that came out of ancient Greece, but it's, I mean, as in a nutshell, you could say it's about enduring hardships and understanding how to live with those hardships, which inevitably are going to come in numerous forms throughout your life. But the Stoics, the people that adhere to this philosophy would sleep in a cot. So when you say a cot, it's like an uncomfortable, contraption to sleep in. They would make sure that they did not overtly pamper themselves as part of their training. So they understood that you could understand the philosophy. So you could read the philosophy all day and talk about hardship and how to do it. But unless you're actually faced with it and dealing with it on a daily basis, you're never going to develop the ability to apply that philosophy. So in a sense, I suppose it's similar to what you've just described.
Definitely.
And a lot of people don't get that today because they think that they can, and this comes back to people who overtly go into martial philosophy as opposed to actual hardship in training as well. So it's one side to really talk about the deep understanding of this gene and that gene and how, but if you're not actually doing it and you're not actually developing it through training, hard training, it's just air that's coming out of your mouth. I mean, that's as far as I can put it. And maybe that's some of the mentality. I mean, I released a video of my teacher. He gave a lecture at Peking University, and in one of them he talks about how initially in previous generations when they started doing Xingyi they had to stand in Santishe for 3 years before the teacher would teach them anything else. And
that's the stereotypical learn martial arts. Yeah.
Well,
right?
Well, my teacher's teacher stood in 3 years before he was taught anything else, and he had already he was already an accomplished Shaolin Quan practitioner, and he stood in for 3 years. And my teacher just explained the mentality of the older generations. He said it was a test. That's, for the most part, it was a test, because if you'll stand for 3 years, then you'll learn, and he'll teach you, and you'll probably have the mental and physical consistency to carry on learning properly. And if you left within those 3 years, for the teacher my teacher said it was, for those older generations, it was like dusting the place. If this kind of student left, it's like good riddance to dust. That's just dust anyway. I don't want to teach that kind of person. So this is part of the mentality that was there. Now, I don't know how practical it is today to make people stand for 3 years, but that's just how it was.
Yeah, that's very much like the one-on-one, one teacher teaching one student kind of style.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something that's another difference as to what I encountered in the Changhong system here is that it's an organization. It's a non-profit organization with a very big social aspect. So in a way, it's more like a martial arts college,
right,
than a one-on-one teachers. It's got a bigger structure. There's a it's run since its inception, it's been run by election, and 3 years there's a chairman, a committee, different sections for because there's trips every year, competitions. There's a social structure which goes with it as well, which is other ways in which the lifestyle or the full integration happens, rather than it's just a little hobby that you do twice a week.
When I was in Taipei the last time, I was actually surprised, because this feeds into what you just said. Close to my hotel, on an adjacent building down the road, there was a big sign advertising Chang Hong. And I don't know if that was a training area or whatnot, but I was surprised to see exactly what you thought, because I didn't know in my mind at that time that it was so widespread. I mean, it's a big organization. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that and how that came about, because it's very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, again, my knowledge of the history is I can just give broad strokes. The details, through my poor Chinese, and also it's not something that was really ever emphasized by my teacher. But basically, through, by the time he was at university, he was already teaching just in a one-on-one, in university clubs, one-on-one kind of thing. And
your teacher,
soon after that,
your teacher.
Yeah, Master Chen Qinghe.
Which university was he at? Because I think that's important.
It was the Wenhua Daxue that was one of the main training centers, because it was Li Maoqing was also teaching there.
All right, so Wenhua Daxue for the non-Mandarin speakers.
In Taipei, that has the history. But again, things have changed so much now. But I mean, around that time, he became the coach of the Taipei Gosuhui, the Wushu, what do you call it? Gosuhui, how would you translate? I guess it's the association. So the Taipei Association of Martial Arts. So, and he was essentially at their premises, had a school, and would teach people who wanted to learn, but also, had to do administrative functions, but also had to deal with people coming in wanting a challenge. So over the years, he had a lot of testing and grounding just in dealing with, it's from sumo, big, massive guys who'd studied sumo before came to challenge and test and see what Chinese martial arts was all about. Big Americans that had done weightlifting and karate also. And these are all, so it was through that. In that sense, he still hadn't formulated the Changhong idea. He was still learning, practicing, and basically in this trial of fire kind of stage. Yeah. Still quite young. But then I guess it's the mid to early 80s, basically left as the Gosuhui coach and started his own thing. And then at that point, he focused in on Tangquan and Hongquan. And from there, obviously started with one school. And then it just, over the years, what was that, 20, almost, I mean, we've had the 31st anniversary already of the association. Wow. And so there's several coaches all the way from Kaohsiung in the south, Taipei in the north, lots of, Hsinchu and Taichung at the medical university. There are lots of, obviously mostly in the north, because that's where most people are in Taiwan, but lots of coaches have opened their own schools. There's younger generations now who are opening up what they call training centers. Could be at a university, at a community center, that kind of thing. And then slowly, if the coach persists, then that can develop into a school, right, just over time. So a lot of schools, and in a way that was, Master Chen, he wasn't just a martial arts coach. He was a CEO in a way. Right. He was a CEO of this massive organization, dealing with a lot of stress. So I mean that lifestyle obviously took its toll.
Of course.
But obviously that was his dream, to build an association. And now, I'm not going to be Asian and just be polite about it. I'm going to say, obviously, since he left, there has been fracturing in the organization.
As there always is.
And there's always is. And it's to assume that it wouldn't happen is just naive.
Totally.
And we mentioned it earlier. It's some people feel like they know enough, and they're going to go and do their own thing. They feel like, it's either they want to change things to be how they like it, or they just want the independence. And it's just a parting of ways. It's no big deal.
How big has the fracturing been? I mean, the guys that have broken off, they're just continuing to teach, but not within the association.
I mean, there's a bit of both. There's some people who have left outright and opened new schools under new names, and then some who want to keep the name but just want to keep independent. So we're really in the transition period.
I see.
But the bulk the bulk is obviously still under the Changhong banner. And what is really interesting is to see the new generation coming in. Just a lot of, university clubs. So that's people who are, between 19 to about 22, 23, that kind of age, people engaging in it. And we've got some very interesting communities, like guys who at the Taichung Yishui Daxue, they're either Western or Chinese medical students, either graduated or about to graduate, who are totally into the traditional Chinese martial arts. So it's there's a lot of different, flavors or types of students that are coming through now.
Interesting.
But in essence, obviously, there have been people who've come to Master Chen in the past who wanted to just learn self-defense and, fighting against a knife, against a gun, that kind of really hard self-defense kind of angle. But in the bulk, just if you talk numbers, it's often families.
Nice.
I'd say so it's a whole family that comes and trains, or it's, like I said, the university student or school kids. So it's a real mix. It's the whole society.
I think that's really important though, because Chinese martial arts for the majority of its history, when we're talking about martial arts as we understand them today, because even that history is so misunderstood. When I talk about martial systems, we're talking about Ming-Qing transition onwards, when we've got the crystallization of martial arts systems with a focus on both weapons and as well as the emergence of bare hand fighting. So when those systems, those were very much a social thing. That part of the function of it was social. It wasn't simply just to train. Like a lot of people want to just chalk it up and say, oh, these are battlefield arts. Now, I've been trying to educate people on the reality of Chinese battlefields through the different ages, and how advanced the Chinese military in terms of method, size, but most importantly, equipment was, that you'd have to be a complete buffoon to think that you're going to train up people barehandedly to go fight on the battlefield. That's just cannon fodder, frankly. So, and that there's a very important
waste of the country's budget.
No, totally. It's the dumbest idea that I've, and the myths perpetuated that people just repeat without looking into the reality. I mean, like, we need to understand that evolution is a process, and there is a connection between cold weapon battlefield and the evolution into social circle bare hand martial arts, because that's what we're talking about with these martial arts, like in civil society, not in military society. And to a degree there was some overlap in terms of villages and banditry and defensive militias and things like that within each village. There is, but it's an evolutionary process. So people need to understand that, and it's natural, and it's something that echoes in many cultures around the world. It's just that in a lot of the cultures outside of Asia, firearms became so pervasive, and people were quite practical that they just abandoned everything else. It's not as if it didn't exist. It's just that we've forgotten that there were other methods out there. Whereas in China and Japan and etc., these practices seem to continue, and it's again due to the historical actualities of what occurred in contrast to these different places. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here. I wanted to say this though. It's really interesting to see that your teacher, he was, you mentioned the Chinese name of the university, Wenhua Daxue, which is the Cultural University of Taipei. I've been there quite a few times. It's actually a really nice place. It's on the top of a mountaining or a
Yangmingshan.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful environment. It's really, I can imagine back then, being a martial arts, studying at the university as a student and having access at a cultural university and having access to a culture like Chinese martial arts on that location would have been really magical. But so I was there because when we were inspecting venues, when I was doing work for the International Federation, we had the Taipei Universiade was being held, and they were going to have Chinese Wushu as an event there, and different venues wanted to host it. And that venue was wonderful except for its size. They really wanted us to host it there because of the historical connection with martial arts at the university. And it's quite important. And it's interesting because that was so prominently pushed out by the government of Taiwan as important, and it's connected to your teacher and his teachers, which is really something that people should be, you guys should be proud of. I'm sure you are. But what's interesting...
No, it's very much...
Yeah.
I mean, also, like, Han Xingtai and also Li Laoshi and Chen Qinghe, they've also did a huge amount of social contributions, like teaching the Qinna curriculum to the police and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of integration.
Right. Well, what's interesting is that my teacher, in his earlier days, like just after the Cultural Revolution, and suddenly the Shaolin Temple movie comes out, and suddenly it's a hot topic. Like Chinese martial arts is hot, and people have stopped the insanity of what was going on before, and suddenly everybody wants to learn. And the Peking University wanted to have a martial arts club, and they had a few teachers that would offer classes for the university students. And one of them was Xing Yiquan, and my teacher was teaching Xing Yiquan to university students. Now, coming from a purely traditional background, and coming from a background of, my teacher he was born in a poor village, a rural village. They moved to Beijing when he was young, but his family was always not well off. He didn't have the opportunity to go to universities or whatever, but he was he had an inquiring mind and always wanted to study himself, irrespective of etc. But he said to me that actually teaching university students is what shaped a lot of his outlooks at that early age onto martial arts. So the inquisitiveness of those students, the way their minds worked, being a new generation, the questions they asked him, the problems that they put forward and put to him, things that wouldn't have happened and didn't happen when he was one generation back training with his teacher, shaped the way...
Yeah, very different.
Yeah. It shaped the way he thought and questioned himself about what... Like, they want precise information, You can't just say, kind of this angle, They'll be like, how much? And it was questions like that made him start questioning himself, which then made him develop his whole future. He's written so much, it hasn't been published, but my teacher's constantly writing stuff. If there is a description of somebody called Wu Chi, which is a martial madman, it's my teacher, because if he's not training and teaching, he's sitting on down and writing about martial arts, and it's all about his own inquisition, about his own training and things that he's set and researched and investigated and writing it out, and God knows what for. I'm grateful to him that he's done it, because at least we'll have it. But this process pushed him, the university experience teaching university kids pushed him into that direction, and I'm pretty sure that's probably what pushed your teacher to go into his direction, that eventually became the Changhong System, became this big social drive, etc.
Yeah, it's the manifestation of the thing that it's got to be suitable for modern day. He'd talk about when he was teaching people who wanted to be coaches, he'd say that you can't teach all people the same way. Like an older man or a younger woman, or just people of different, like a school student versus someone who wants to learn fighting. You can't use the same tone and the same techniques and the same method to teach them. Right. If you're a good martial arts teacher, you have to modify to what it's not just like selling them what they want to buy or teaching them what they want to hear. Obviously that's got issues. You've got no backbone, you're going to lose the principles. But you've got to entice them into the thing, got to make it interesting, and you've got to make it accessible to them.
Right. Yeah, so, actually, that coming back to Bagua Zhang is how Dong Haichuan taught, the founder of Bagua Zhang. He had a group of students, and he taught them differently based on their individual abilities, background, and already developed skills, physical conditions, etc., which is really interesting. The principles were, pushed through the same, but the focus for each person worked on their strengths and their other bits of experience, which is interesting. So
yeah, I've heard that in the older generation of guys of our system, they would they would have specialized forms that they were taught because it would suit them. That's kind of fallen away now to more general curriculum for everyone. But in the earlier generations, it was like that.
Yeah, my teacher said the same thing to me about, for example, Qinghe. We have 12 animals, right? We have the 5 elements, which are the foundation, and then you have the 12 animals, which are the advanced practices of Qinghe Quan. And he would tell me, and when he initially told me this, when I was learning the 12 animals, I didn't quite understand it. He said, Byron, you need to find one of the animals that you have the most affinity for and develop it deeply. And I thought, why? I want to develop them all.
Exactly. You want it all, yes. Yeah,
exactly. He said, no, you learn it all, but there are a few that you're going to find affinity for, and it's different for everyone. Yeah. And those are the ones you need to refine deeply. And I thought, no, I'm going to refine them all. Anyway.
Yeah. thereby breaking the definition of refinement.
Exactly. So, I mean, even Sun Lutang, who was a famous, he wrote one of the earliest groundbreaking books in the modern age on Qinghe Quan. He was known as the monkey because that was just suitable to him. He had, right. and he focused on that. I mean, that was one of it. Not that he didn't practice all the animals, but those are the ones that he found affinity for. And over the years, I found a few of the animals that suit me, my character, my physical condition, etc. as well. So that's really important. But what would you say?
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead. Sorry.
In the Hong, just to finish that point, in the Hong Quan example, in the Hong Quan, as in legend, it has 5 animals or 10 animal forms. And then if you're coming it with this kind of this illusion about what wushu is, you think, yeah, of course, I'm going to learn all 10. Great. And then you slowly realize, oh, actually, there are a whole bunch that don't actually get taught anymore. Because this teacher has no interest in them and feels that they're a total waste of time and you should rather focus on this, and that. And actually, the one that's suitable for you is this one. So, yeah, totally the same.
Yeah. If you could describe the Changhong system for people in general, I mean, maybe we could discuss a little bit about the system, its curriculum, how it's taught, what you found through your learning process of it.
Okay, I mean, in a way, because obviously your knowledge of history, so I mean, is way better than mine. So probably as I mentioned some of the things you can maybe say as to where they've come from or connections to other systems. So obviously we start with the Changquan, the long fist system, which has come from the Nanjing Institute, and always with the Lianbu Quan, which in itself is a bit of a curious form because it's got a wide range of some say it was developed by students at the Nanjing Institute. Some say it's got connection. It was actually from a dragon system, but anyway, it's a very simple form. What's weird about it is for a basic form, it's not totally symmetrical. Our second form, which is Gongli Chen, which I may be wrong here, but as far as I know, Gongli Chen was what's the other martial arts institute?
Jingwu.
Jingwu. It was one of the basics of the Jingwu. It's called Gongli Quan.
Yeah.
And that's a very typical basic form. It's very symmetrical. You practice everything both sides.
Okay.
And in a way, and so our teacher would say either Lianbu Quan or Gongli Quan. They're both very good starting forms. So yeah, you start off with these very simple Changquan forms. Prior to that, obviously, you learn stance basics, basic kicks, and those kind of things, basic punching, and then slowly you progress with kind of a dappled pattern of so the pole gun being very important. You learn the panlong gun, which is the basic Hong Quan pole first, then you'd learn a sword form. The Hong Quan.
Can I ask you something about your pole form? So it's Panlong Guan, and you say it's from the Hong Quan system. Can I ask you which hand is in the lead? On the staff.
The right hand.
The right hand. Okay.
The right hand's forward, halfway down the left. But it's a double-headed form. You can use a shorter pole, but I think traditionally it was used what's it called, the lagan, the rat's tail pole.
Okay. Okay, so
The one thick one.
one
But
thick
it
tapered
you do
tapered
you
point.
do tapered, but so the main like powerful overhead striking is always done while you're holding the thick end and hitting with the thin end. But there are moves where you swap and hit with the other end. Yeah.
But are they
Short range.
excessive, the strikes? I mean, within that routine, the utilization of the butt or the end, is that a lot of techniques or just a few?
Small percent, I guess, just roughly, I'd say 20%.
Okay, so it is very much in line with a single-headed Southern Star
Yeah.
form. Yeah, yeah, interesting.
Because I mean, people, maybe it's something we should mention now is why practice weapons now? Sure, people have this historical interest in weapons, but why practice them? Why is it important in martial arts? And then each of these systems have their key weapons. So the pole forms in Hong Chen are very important. So starting with Panlong Gun and Hongmen Gun, and then the ones that are better known is the Wuden Meihua Gun and the Liuden Ban Gun,
Right.
which are the more well-known. That kind of set, if you were to learn Hong Chen and never touch those, there'd be just like this vast area of your Hong Chen that would be totally different. It would just be lacking. Projecting force to the tip, basic. If you want to summarize what it's teaching, obviously it's more than that, but if you were to say in one thing, it's projecting force to the tip, and there's in the Chinese literature there's always analogies between the way that the pole strikes and the fist, the way a basic punch works, and then in a more advanced sense, it's how the pole is similar to the crane, the sudden striking of the crane, the jing of the crane. So it's a very important part of Hong Chen. Obviously, you start with very slow. The form, the pole's totally glued to your body all the time. So you've got 3 contact points, the body and the 2 hands.
Right.
But then in the later forms, it moves away, similar to what you showed me in your Qinghe, the way you hold the pole at arm's length and vibrate. We've got obviously we don't use massive poles, but very similar moves, very similar concepts.
That's an important point, what you just said there, which is that the weapons are supposed to help you further develop your hand practice.
Extension.
It wasn't until I started, I'd been doing Qinghe for a period of time, and then my teacher started making me do spear. And it was as if he gave me a key to a door, because suddenly a lot of the 5 elements, energies, etc. just made sense. Like the bare-handed stuff it was like an aha moment with some of the spear that slowly as it developed. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but it's really important, and you're right.
Well, it's basically, it's obviously there's more to it, but in one sense, it's La Na Za. It's that basic, it's that spear basic. And you just got to do a lot of that, a lot. I have not got there yet. Other weapons slightly, but yeah, that's on the roadmap. You've basically got to crack open La Na Za, that basic move, and do it a lot, and then you'll start understanding the more advanced northern.
For sure.
Kind of thing. Yeah,
it's very interesting, and we've deviated. So you were speaking about your content and your curriculum, and you go on to Panlong Gun, etc. So sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and then it just, I don't think there's need to give the exact order, but then it would come back to Maifu Chen. You'd then come back to some basic bare hand northern styles, Maifu Chen, which is kind of still considered fairly entry level or intermediate level form. So it's more typical palm, fist, and hook of northern, where Gongli Chen and Lembu Chen are more just pushes with the palms, basic punches. This is more like finger stripes, manipulation. It's strong basis of the China, all the wrist manipulations, those turning and twisting. And then you, obviously your entry level bare hand form for the Hong Chen is Gongzi Fu Chen. That's kind of seen as the key entry to build the tiger structure. Tiger's all about just building structure, the skeleton, making your body upright, square. And I'm interested to see your take on this. But I mean, one thing Master Chen mentioned is said that several styles don't have such low stances. And something about that, people would look at Hongchen with its very low Ma Bu stance, which is basically your thighs are parallel to the floor and your feet are double shoulder width. Like, what's the practical application of that, right? But in terms of, just Gongfa and Qi development, that he would say that someone who's never done that level of practice, if they only ever used high stances, he felt they'd be missing a whole depth to their power.
Well, it's quite interesting, the whole concept of mabu, or horse stance. I mean, this idea of and this is just something that's I've got somewhat my own understanding of through, and I wouldn't say it's black and white, but Zhuang, or post standing, or standing in static postures. If we can't think that it just came out of thin air. I don't know why people would think that. Like, suddenly, we have the system, and suddenly somebody's going to decide, I'm going to stand still and just stand here for a long time, just out of the blue. It obviously developed from something, and I have a feeling, and it seems to be the case, that this is part of military training. In what sense? Standing in formation. Okay, so Santi Shi standing is very similar to standing in formation with a spear, and I'm pretty sure as we see the refinement in military professionalism, which we could say began in the Tang dynasty, but really got developed through the Song dynasty, where they started having physical training as part of the basic training for soldiers. We can probably assume that they also practiced standing. And if Santi Shi is something that infantry, well, not Santi Shi, but standing statically in formation and holding spears and other long, heavy weapons, was something that infantry did, you've got to think that cavalry, being on the back of a horse for a long time, would have something similar. And Mabu might actually have its origins in the basic physical conditioning training of cavalry. So that is what you're imitating. You're imitating how you'd be standing and holding a horse with your legs, and right. That doesn't mean that that's the only use it has today, because that's the kernel. And we found that over time, they found the benefit directly to the further practice into these arts that we do today. So Mabu probably as a root most likely has this functionality at its basic root. But as you said, they found out that it's got all these other benefits with regards to your barehanded practice and these styles.
There definitely would be environmental reasons like that, definitely.
So.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of practice, it's symmetrical. It's
Yeah, so that's the one side of things, and then you'll find obviously that we practice things to a larger range of motion to develop physical ability and apply them to a differing range of motion. So you're not going to stand at 90 degrees with regards to combat, for example. But having developed legs and the ability strong enough to do that, then a higher posture will be even stronger. You'll be able to maintain it longer. Your musculature, etc., will be in better condition to use it. So these are. It's like, I mean, we can use the Western analogy of weightlifting. You might weightlift much more weight than you do pick up in your daily life, but that ability helps you to pick up things in your daily life easier and with less injury and things like that. So these are complicated processes that people shouldn't look at on a simple, superficial level. So, yeah.
I mean, and also just to carry on with the curriculum thing, the each of these stages, and the best example maybe is the Hongchen, where you first learn the Tiger, which teaches you structure. Mm-hmm. And the traditional saying is that the Hongchen, the Tiger trains the bones, which is basically your structure, that you're upright and square. And then you'd learn the basic Tiger form, then it could be interleaved with other northern forms, but there would be the basic snake form and the basic crane form, and that's basically it for people. For most people, that's all you really need to focus on, because snake is about very smooth, rounded, flowing, and crane has got this kind of this. I don't even know how to say it in English. It's because it's not flicking. Is it flicking? Is that the right word? It's like that sudden explosive force. I mean, maybe that's the way. And direct, it starts getting to triangulation and angles, which are very very important in sparring strategy.
So a type of elastic, but not soft, more like exactly like the bird. It's when a bird pecks you, it's not soft, but it's sudden, fast, and on point, and it flicks.
Just totally focused, high speed, and without run up. Doesn't need a run up.
Right.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And for the most part, I mean, is there a time frame that you guys aim to cover the bulk of, or this core curriculum, that when you teach it?
Yeah, I mean, so we still haven't spoken about the Baishi, the Rumen situation. Like becoming part of the Changhong, what do you call it, inner circle.
Okay, you have that, obviously.
So there's what I'm talking about now is the standard curriculum, which anyone can learn, and that is pretty much set out over time. The gradings as well, which it's not very strict. It's just to keep checking on you and just have a chance for the other coaches to also give some input on the way that you train, which is a good also way to just minimize deviations. Just everyone has a look at everyone's students, and students are always a reflection of the coaches, and the coaches' bad habits will definitely pop up in the students. That's guaranteed. But so there's, I can't, it's been so long, it's probably like within 10 to 15 years you could finish the standard curriculum,
right?
Of roughly about 30 forms, and there about another 25 to 30 forms, which would only be for people who go through the Baishi ceremony, which again it's obviously when Master Chen was still around, it was still to him, you would Baishi, but again it's slightly more like an organization.
Okay.
You're now joining the more private facing part of the organization, and you've shown interest, you've shown commitment, but maybe not, I don't know, but my feeling is it's probably not as strict as a very traditional one student, one teacher kind of Baishi lifetime commitment kind of thing, in that it's more like an academy, it's more like an association. Okay. But it is reserved for people who've put in the time and show commitment and help out to the organization.
Okay. And you've obviously gone through that.
I did that. A couple of years, maybe like after I was in Taiwan for about 3 years. I had to go through a couple of gradings first.
Yeah.
But I was well, because I was already a coach in South Africa.
It's not as
not a professional coach. Yeah. But and then they kind of all had, was quite familiar with everyone anyway.
Now, I wanted to, if you're willing to talk a little bit about your teacher's Hunggar teacher, Hongquan teacher. I mean, we don't have to get into anything outside of it. From people that I have spoken to over the years that have had contact with him, only spoke highly of his martial skill. I mean, some of the stuff that I've heard about him was borderline superhuman, but you've always got to take things with a grain of salt. But I've only heard, in terms of his martial ability, very interesting things. So I don't know if you could comment on those things.
Yeah, I'm probably the wrong person to ask for the facts, because I'm just passing on what I've heard. I've actually never met the man, and that's maybe a sign for more. Like, why would I have never met him?
Yeah.
So it's just from what I've heard, that when he was young, he was incredible, an incredible athlete, very skilled. And like you said, Sun Wukong was the monkey. He also was very much like had that, high speed, fast movements, tricky, very good sparring techniques. So in the positive side, I think he was everything. He really was that, what do you call it, inheritor of the Hongchen lineage, and worthy of it. On the negative side, I mean, it's just hearsay, so I really don't want to say it. It's more, the things that I heard was that it's more like in that era, and I'm assuming this era is the mid-80s, mid-90s, something like that. Through that era, and it was one of these phases when Hongchen became popular, or when martial arts became popular, that he was willing to change things based on the students' requirements, and not like, I don't know, like, okay, what do you want to learn? Okay, I'll teach you that.
I see.
So maybe just slightly more financially motivated or whatever, but literally, I'm really not the person to be asking about that.
Is he still around?
As far as I know, yes. But again, I have no contact.
Right, yeah. Well, just interesting. I mean, I know people. I had met somebody when I was in Taipei that I've been, he's a family of an acquaintance, but he had studied with your teacher, I think, back in the university days. I mean, he's not a young guy,
right?
And he had spoken about the incredible ability of the. I mean, this is just, and that just came out of nowhere. That came out of left field, because, I mean, I had known you by that point for so many years, and I'd known about your system, etc., and your teachers, etc., and where it came from. And then to meet somebody through an acquaintance in Taipei that was like, oh yeah, I trained with them, and also talking about the abilities of the Hungar teacher, the Hungar master, and just some of the things were just superhuman. But it's interesting to see. I mean, skill is skill. So you, irrespective of everything else, you've got to give credit where credit's due. So anyway, that's interesting. Yeah.
But I mean, what you're saying is true. If you just take the umbrella of Zhang Ke and everyone who learned Hongchen from him, and Li Maoqing, and everyone who learned, and Han Xingtan, everyone who learned Hongchen from them, it's a huge amount of people in Taiwan and around the world.
Right.
So yeah, it's quite widely spread.
I wanted to ask you something regarding some of your basic training. You guys start from a basis of Northern as fundamentals, setting the foundation for basics, right? I have asked you this a little bit before, because I mean, I did some looking into Han Xingtan's background, and I did see that he did Cha, and he also did Meihua, so Meihua Quan, Meihua Zhuang, etc. Now, this was interesting because when I spoke to my teacher about Meihua years ago, he was like, yeah, we all did that as basics. And I was like, why? It's a system, But he's like, well, actually, we did. Meihua's foundational basis is holding certain postures. Some are shun, like with same arm, same leg extended. Some are ao, so with the opposite hand and opposite leg. And he said we'd have to stand and hold these like extended postures and breathe for X amount of breaths, and then change to the next one and breathe for X amount of breaths. And it was foundational basic training of stances and body and basic structure and things like that. Do you guys still do any of those as part of your basics?
No,
not at all.
No, just 6 basic stances. I mean, the things that would be the basics of the Changchen is something called Yibu Sanquan, which is basically 3 punches in a row with a step linked to each, and you do it across the class and back.
Okay.
And there's some basic duilian, partner punching and blocking that come from that.
Right.
More than that, no.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, the key basics, which I think, I think it's largely a Changchen heritage, although very disguised as warm-up movements, the 5 basics warm-up movements, which are actually the core to all the mechanics of the system, which is, Ho Bi Schweijau, just how basic, which is all your rotation, turning on central axis,
shoulder, waist, etc., hips.
Yeah. So in a way, that's what I focus on now.
Oh, really?
It's like where before I used to be, I've got to remember all these form movements. I want to make sure that I practice every form.
It's hard.
At least once a month, 2, 3. Now, especially with having kids now, work's busy, and I said, I'm very happy to just get my basics done every day.
Well, that's the key. I mean, that
change of focus.
Yeah, I mean, that's also the key. Like my teacher used to say to me, he said, if you're busy, make sure you do Neigong every day. You can not do something else, but do Neigong every day, and that will, you'll at least be working on the key requirements of the core, at the core of the essence, and you can be too busy to do all the other stuff, but just try to at least do the Neigong. And I guess it's a similar thing here. So. Yeah, you've got kids now. What are do you have future plans? Where do you see yourself? Are you going to remain in Taiwan? What is?
Yeah. We're going to brave the Taiwan education system. What I mean by that is it's very competitive, and it's all about getting into good schools and all that nonsense. So yeah, I think I'm just going to follow my parents' approach to education. It's just like.
Right.
The basic school down the road, you learn a lot of what you're going to learn at home and from your friends.
Right.
Etc. Try and get into a good university. That should do you.
Are you going to teach your kids?
But yeah.
Martial arts.
If they want to learn, I'm definitely not going to force them. But they because we've had the second now, and the wrestling matches have already started.
Good. You see, this is why I keep saying when people are trying to say wrestling was invented here, I'm like, no. Monkeys wrestle. Mammals wrestle. No. That's just how it is. So
we actually, because my daughter's 4 now, and we're taking her out just to see, does she like dancing or does she like martial arts? We're just trying. I'm definitely not forcing anything on her. And so we went and looked at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class, and I was very pleased to see that it was 80% girls.
Oh yeah,
and we're talking young. It's like from 4 years to probably about 8 years.
Yes,
all girls.
Yeah,
very interesting.
I wanted to say something about that because yesterday, I mean, I grapple a few times a week, and on Wednesday mornings there's a kindergarten that is in there, bunch of kids. And they do some wrestling / grappling stuff. They're young. I mean, they're like exactly 4, 5, 6 years old, right? And there's a bunch.
So the key thing is rolling at that stage.
Exactly.
Being comfortable to roll around.
Exactly. But what I noticed, apart from the fact that the girls were there, and I've got to film this the next time I'm there. The girls are trouncing the boys. I mean, literally trouncing them. I'm just sitting there watching this girl absolutely smother, and next to her is another girl absolutely smothering this other boy. And they're the same size, they're the same age, and I'm like, now this is awesome. We need more of this. But yeah, it's very good. I think it's very good for them. I mean, I think it's really, and it's a good way for them to burn their excessive energy. So it's a good thing. Yeah. For sure.
It's that killer instinct.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're talking about the not even professional fighting, but semi-professional or combat martial arts, I'm still very in two minds about it, because I think you're either born a fighter or you're not. You can definitely hone things, you can definitely improve, but my gut feeling is that some people just have that thing. That kind of unflinching, the Chinese saying is "itan" early gongfu, san gongfu. So the main thing is bravery. Then second priority is the willingness to fight. The second priority is to have enough force, and then the third thing is actual skill.
Right.
So yeah, I kind of buy into that, but it depends on if you go into a martial art and you're just using it as the outer shell to use your instinctive force anyway, then it doesn't matter what you learn, because it's just your instinct that you're using. But if you're going to go into it and really change the way you use force and actually become totally center orientated force instead of isolated areas of force like shoulders or biceps on their own, I think it can make a difference.
We've had this. We had this discussion. We had this discussion years ago when we were both still in South Africa, and we had the national Sanda competitions, and we'd be watching, and you'd be judging as well. And you used to say the same thing. You can just see. You would say this guy, he's just got a natural gift for beating the snot out of people. It's just there.
Yeah.
You could just see it when somebody doesn't. And I agree that is something that people have or don't have. But I also think, and this is probably influenced by my Qinghe training. That like in Qinghe we do so much with intent, like so much focused intent. I mean, to the point that I don't want to talk about some of the things we actually visualize, but so much so to the point that I think that can also change someone's natural disposition towards fighting. So if somebody is somewhat meek over the years of training through this method and then developing the physical skills, but doing the intent and mind stuff, I think you can turn somebody into,
Yeah.
from what he was to somebody that would be very willing and easy and able to get into skills aside.
What she was, Byron. What she
or
was.
she,
Remember,
yeah. He or she, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So yeah, I think there's a little bit to both of that, and the final thing is about like 百敲百能无力不行. I mean, that's just my teacher repeats that 100 times. It's like, yeah, you think you've got you know all these skills. I mean, literally the translation is you're going to have 100 skills and 100 abilities, but if you have no power, forget it. They're not going to work.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is important for people to understand that go onto the like mystical, magical side of martial arts, thinking that that's going to do it for them, and avert hard training, and not just hard in terms of physically hard, but mentally hard to refine your technique, refine your methods, refine your issuing of force and mechanics. If you're avoiding that,
it's definitely a pyramid in terms of time and effort. You've got to have that time spent in the wide base.
Right.
And people often just dash to the peak and think that somehow it's going to work without all that basis.
Right.
It's not going to work.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. So, where do you see yourself? I mean, what is your function within the association apart from your own training? Are you teaching? Do you assist with those things?
With kids, 2 young kids now, I'm basically quite absent. I mean, I did help with we have seminars. We had a sparring class seminar, which I helped out with recently. So yeah, I do try and stay involved. I am involved in some, call it like admin capacities, helping out with video promotions, editing, that kind of thing. Because obviously that's my professional background. But yeah, because I got Taiwanese citizenship 2 years ago.
Oh, congratulations!
So now I can actually get. It's terrible because now I can actually get voted in as a member on the board, which
it's terrible.
so yeah, slowly getting dragged into these admin roles. But yeah, I don't think I'll ever be a professional coach. Who knows? But it's
right.
I don't know. I've always been more like the helping other professional coaches. Well, that's kind of been my sweet spot in martial.
Well, that's one of the things from the first day I met you that stood out to me about you, was that you're a martial artist because you love martial arts. So a lot of people get involved with the wrong idea and the wrong intention, and they're like, oh, I want to open a school, that's why I'm learning, or I want to be a teacher, that's why I'm learning. And personally, I mean, I don't really like that mentality at all. For me, it's like you've started on the wrong foot, man. But anyway, you've always been doing martial arts because you genuinely want to practice and you enjoy martial arts. And where that's taken you is where it takes you, whether it be a position or, teaching or whatever is not the primary goal. Your whole goal has always been your practice.
Yeah, it's its own reward. I mean, I started because all my high school friends were training, and they all left and I stayed. But you got to find your own balance to it.
Well, the kids will grow up. Your time will change. The kids will be big before you even blink your eye 3 times. You'll look back and say, wow, that went fast. And
exactly.
The one constant you'll always have is your training. So that's a good thing. And keep at it. I mean, that's all I can say, I mean, we've both been trying to just do what we've been doing and maintain our focus on our art. So the world changes, it goes up in flames, the fires burn out, but you can try stay centered. Stay centered.
And you're just standing in Santish the whole time.
Exactly.
Watching it happen.
Exactly. That's exactly how it should be. So anyway. Yeah. Anyway, it's been great talking to you. I don't want to take too much of your day with your commitments there. So
Yeah, thanks a lot, Byron. It's been great to chat.
Yeah, I don't know if you want anybody to get in contact with you, or maybe we'll just put links to the Changhong Association, etc.
Yeah, I'll send you the website link, and you can just put it under the video.
All right, we'll do all that. Okay, and then you keep well over there, and we'll be in touch soon. So thanks for everything.
Yeah, you too.
It was a great
Cheers,
chat.
man.
Bye.
Great to chat. Bye.